The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. When there were no depths, I was brought forth, when there were no fountains abounding with water. Before the mountains were settled, before the hills was I brought forth, while as yet he had not made the earth, nor the fields, nor the highest part of the dust of the world. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the depth, when he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep, when he gave to the sea his decree that the water should not pass his commandment, when he appointed the foundations of the earth, then I was by him.
I am wisdom. Those who seek me shall find me.
Welcome to Wisdom Seekers, another adventure into the mysteries of success. Remember, this is a 6-video series lesson plan on the end-time transfer of wealth. In lesson 1, we talked about what is the end-time transfer of wealth. Well, it's the wealth goes from Egypt to Israel, or the world to the church. In lesson 2, we talked about why will there be a transfer of wealth? Well, because the unrighteous rich have misused earth. Earth profit, its wealth. In lesson number 3, we talked, when will it occur? And according to Scripture, whenever the children of God grow up and become sons. I think. Now, you have to decide that. Remember, you're the grand jury. And another thing, remember, you own a business. You've operated for 30 or 40 years. You started it, and you're going to turn it over to someone else to run. God created the heavens and the earth. He placed man steward over the earth in an effort to provide man to run it for him. With that comparative analogy, what are you looking for in people to run your business? God's looking for the same thing. And if you got people misusing your business, thinking that it's theirs, all of a sudden they're the owner, not the steward, then you run into the same problem God runs into. Because we think that what we have is ours and not God's when he created it, right? Now, lesson 4. Who will take part in the end-time transfer of wealth? Look up here, 2 Chronicles 16:9. Scripture says, I'm just going to give you the whole verse and we'll just show part of it on the screen. The eyes of the Lord look to and fro across the earth to show himself strong on behalf of them whose heart is right toward God. So what is God looking for? He's looking for a right heart. Is yours right? Is mine right? I'd like to have a right heart before God because God's going to transfer the wealth. But you know what? Even if there is no transfer of wealth, which I think there is, you're preparing yourself for eternity. That's forever. And what is God looking for in eternity? Same thing he's looking for now. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he doesn't change. Now, who will be part of the end-time transfer of wealth? On the text, on your notes, who will be a part of the end-time transfer of wealth? The answer is the righteous who seek to establish God's covenant. In lesson 1, we see that man is steward of the earth God created. The righteous act on the knowledge of that truth. They believe that the earth's profit is for all men. The unrighteous foolishly love earth's profit, not earth's creator. They fight and war to grasp all they can. Lesson 2 teaches that the righteous have the mind of Christ. In wisdom they labor as unto the Lord. The unrighteous labor for money and men. The righteous look to Christ for contentment. The unrighteous look for contentment in mammon or earth's profit. Lesson 3 teaches that the righteous exercise patience in their labor and wait for God's leading and provision in their financial matters. I'd like to stop there for just a moment. What's the difference between a child and a son?
Maturity.
Maturity. The child wants everything now. He doesn't have to work because dad provides it or mom provides it. But his son is different. He's getting on his own, starting his own business. He's got his own responsibility, doesn't he? Okay, so the child wants everything now, and he doesn't have the patience to wait. When God says that love, which God is patient, it's the very first attribute of God. Well, how does patience help us? Hebrews 6:19 says, in patience possess ye your souls. You possess your own soul through patience. What does that mean by that? Well, it means this. We want things now. Well, if we don't have the money to get them now, how do we get them now? Credit. Now we get them through credit. Now we have to pay much more for the same item that maybe God would have given to us had we waited. And I'm just as guilty as everybody else. We're all guilty of that. Now, we want to be less guilty. So we want to start exercising patience, because if I'm truly God's steward and I'm managing whatever property God has for me to manage, won't He provide? Now, but do I have the faith to believe that He will provide? See, that's the key. Because, see, in patience, I can get anything I want right now. The only thing, I have to pay the world in addition to God. And then we can get so far into debt that we can't tithe. So then a new automobile with all the credit on it, or a couch, or vacation, or a boat, takes the tithe, doesn't it? Because we buy the boat, we can't afford to tithe. We buy the car, we can't afford to tithe. And then in addition to that, we got to pay more interest on the same item. This has been about 15 years ago now. I was looking at some research, found out that one of the largest denominations in this country spends twice as much money on interest debt as they do money to foreign missions, which means the world is getting twice what the missionaries are getting. And then it means this: if that denomination simply got out of debt, they could triple their giving to foreign missions with no additional money. Okay? Now, the unrighteous, looking for contentment in things, become impatient. They want things now and overextend credit to get what God may have given them had they waited. They become heavily indebted and servants to the lenders. As a result, they can't or won't tithe and rob God and the nation. Lesson 4 teaches that God can't bless those who won't acknowledge their stewardship. God is looking for a heart that is perfect toward Him, that He might show Himself strong on behalf of that person. Sons of God are unselfish. Children of God aren't. They look to establish God's covenant, not their own careers and lifestyles. They have the heart that God is looking for in the end-time transfer of wealth. Now, put yourself in God's place, and there's 4 things here we want to ask ourselves. Number 1, if you were God, would you want the righteous with the knowledge and the mind of Christ ruling on planet Earth, or would you want the wicked with the knowledge of man? Number 2, lesson 2. Would you want men laboring as unto the Lord with the wisdom of God, or laboring for money with the wisdom of man? Number 3, would you want in positions of rulership children of God, or do you want the sons of God who can exercise some patience in their life? Because if you don't have that, you have the children of wrath, or disobedient children. And then number 4, which lesson we're in now, do you want the righteous ruling or the wicked ruling? And what's the key? It's the heart. So what is God looking for? He's looking for a heart that is right toward God. Page 2. God's covenant serves all men. Deuteronomy 8:17 on the chart. And let me change the page here. Deuteronomy 8:17 says, "And thou say in thine heart, my power and the might of my hand hath gotten me this wealth. And thou say in thine heart, my power and the might of my hand hath got me this wealth." The first part of that verse says this: "But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is He that giveth thee power to get wealth." Who's it come from? It comes from God. And you say, wait a minute, no, I work hard, I use my smarts, and this is mine. I worked for it, I earned it, I deserve it, I'll spend it where I want. That's a wrong heart attitude. So what's God going to do? How long will God sit there and continue this kind of behavior to go on? How long would you allow it to go on if you had a business? Page 2. On the notes here, look at the text. Self-serving men ignore God's covenant. Self-serving men ignore God's covenant. Now, why does God give wealth? To establish His covenant. So, if I'm not serving God, and God's given me wealth anyway, He's working against His own program. And He wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do it, so why should God do it? In the text, selfish will not be a part of the ETOW, which is what? The end-time transfer of wealth. God created the earth and gave man stewardship over it. It is God's will that all men profit from earth's wealth, not just a few. Unfortunately, men love and seek earth's mammon and not the God who created all the wealth. That's vanity. Now, how do you think, look up here for a minute, how do you think God feels? God created the heavens and the earth. Then He gives man all this wealth, and man loves the wealth and not the God who gave him the wealth. Same thing in marriage, or with your children, or with the people that work for you in a business. Let's get that. You know what? You love what you get, not the giver. And that's wrong. I mean, we're making a serious mistake when we do that. Man cannot be fulfilled by things. Remember, if man can be fulfilled by things, then he's always going to fight for things. Then who would have authored war? God would have. God ordained that men would find contentment in giving, not in getting. Those who think that they are owners are worshiping Baal or Mammon and not God. The Hebrew word for owner is Baal. So when you think you're an owner and not a steward, you're a Baal worshiper. Baal worshipers forfeit the peace of God. In hoarding or keeping wealth, they hurt or trouble themselves. In pride, they claim personal credit for success, and in so doing, cause God to resist them, 1 Peter 5:5. God will not allow the selfish Baal worshipers to be a part of the end-time transfer of wealth. Would you? Do you want Baal worshipers running your business for you? No, you don't. Continuing in the text, God blesses the heart of man, not just the labor of his hands. See, that's the problem. See, we're looking at what we do with our hands. God's looking at our heart. And what guides our hands to do what our heart tells it to do. He requires that men work, 2 Thessalonians 3:10, but He doesn't bless selfish labor. Now, you can get a paycheck, but you can't get a blessing. Those who labor for mammon and not as unto the Lord shortchange themselves. In Ecclesiastes 5:9-15, Solomon reveals the end results of self-serving men and women. Now, the greedy self-destruct. I'm going to read Ecclesiastes 5:9-15, and we're going to try to circle a key word in each one of those verses and then write that word to the right. Moreover, the profit of the earth is for all. The king himself is served of the field. Earth's profit is for who? All. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This also is what? Vanity. Circle the word vanity. You know, when you stop and think about it, it's really stupid to love the things God created and not the God. It's really stupid, isn't it? It is stupid to serve for those things rather than the God who created them. And God's just trying to give us a simple lesson that we can take into eternity. Remember, you can't take anything in your hand, but you can take what's in your heart. Now, when goods increase, there increase that eat them. And what good is there to the owners thereof, saving the beholding of them with their eyes? Man is God's steward, not what? Not an owner. If I think that I'm the owner of one single thing, I'm making a mistake. And you know what the world has done? The reason the world has been able to pass on riches from generation to generation is because they don't own anything. It's in a trust. We haven't learned that as Christians. If you pass it on in a trust, it's always protected. Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. You can't do it any other way except in a trust. And then you're not an owner, you're a steward. And you only manage what's there. You see, the less you have in life, the better off you are. We'll go into trust later on in another section. And verse 12, the sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eat little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not suffer him to sleep. Men who worship mammon forfeit what? They forfeit peace. The reason you can't sleep is because you don't have any peace. There's a sore evil which I have seen under the sun, namely riches kept for the owners thereof to their own hurt. Selfish men what? Hurt themselves. And everybody else around them. And then 14, but those riches perish by evil travail, and he begetteth a son, and there's nothing in his hand. Riches perish through what? Bad what? Investments. "15, as he came forth out of his mother's womb, naked shall he go to as he came, and shall take nothing of his labor, which he may carry in what? His hand." Didn't say about his heart, his head, and his hand. Page 3. Men serve God or they serve mammon. Everybody makes a decision in their life. Who are you going to serve? It doesn't make sense to serve the dirt or the tree. And there are guys, tree huggers, they serve the trees. And the most stupid thing of all, according in Hosea chapter 4, is a man take a tree that God created and grow. They cut it down and make a god out of it and worship it. I mean, that is really the height of ignorance. Anyway, Luke 16:13 says this, no man can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and mammon. Now, if the borrower is a servant to the lender, and the lender then becomes the master, and Jesus is the master, how can you serve both of them? So one of the keys in life, I think, is getting out of debt. And you know what? All you got to do is make the commitment to God. If you make it a commitment, God will make it a reality. You have to start somewhere, and all of us have made mistakes. All of us, to some extent or another, have a little bit of credit. But you can make a commitment. God, I want to get out of debt. I want to be your steward, not an owner. Okay. Then the question is, who are you serving? That's the question. Now, Christians can't use worldly methods and succeed. Most Christians would not purposely serve another god. But when the motivation for labor is money, we do serve another god. Jesus clearly states that men cannot serve two masters. Those who labor for money do not serve God. They serve Baal. When Christians use worldly methods to gain riches, they serve mammon. They forfeit righteous dominion and subject themselves and the money they earn and manage to Satan's kingdom. Satan can then legally take their worldly gain to enrich the children of this world. And when the wicked are rich and rule, they outlaw God and oppress men. You know what it is? See, it's a battle, kind of a battle on who you're going to serve. If you serve God, He's going to bless you. But in serving God, you have to use His principles. What are His principles? You tithe to His kingdom. Taxes serve the world's kingdom. So people who are paying taxes and not tithing are supporting the world and not supporting God. They're not serving God's covenant. They're serving the covenant of the enemy. And when you think, I can't tithe, you know what it is? You don't believe God. You say, God, if I plant some seed by tithing, you're not going to bring the rain and produce a crop. He'll do it. He's been doing it for 6,000 years. When did He ever stop? Now, at the bottom of page 3, there's a pictorial. That pictorial represents the passage in Ecclesiastes 5:9-15. There's a man looking at the earth. Now, that passage says the earth is for who? All. That earth is for the profit of all. Can you imagine God making planet Earth so that some men can be the masters and other men the slaves? God would never do that, but that's become a reality. Why? Because the God of this world, who is Satan, he wants it all for himself. So you know what he does? Satan will make men rich, and he'll make a covenant with them to the point that he can then destroy him. Because what? He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So if you're serving him, the end result is destruction. If you're serving Christ, the end result is life. And Satan, that's the game that he plays. He gets you rich so that he can destroy you. And then through riches you self-destruct. Now, number 10. If your heart is not operating out of love, it's vanity. And verse number 10 says that everybody's after silver and gold, and that's their heart's mindset. That's vain. That's vanity. It's an absolute waste. Now, verse 11 talks about being an owner. See, if I think that I'm an owner and my heart's not right toward God because God's looking for a right heart and I'm serving the world, it's vanity. And I'm trying to get everything for me because the guy who gets the most wins, okay, then I'm in trouble. And 3 things happen there. Verse 12 says, I forfeit peace. So no peace. Verse 13 says, people who do that hurt themselves. And then verse 14, they lose what they got through bad investments. So you see that the prospects of being an owner aren't too good. Why? Because if you're an owner and it's not God's, then Satan's got the right to take it. And who wants to work all your life only to have Satan steal it? Then verse 15, as he came out of his mother's womb, he's going to go back the same way. As he came, he's going to leave with 0 in his hands. Page 4. First Timothy 6:18. This is talking about the rich man. In fact, in 1 Timothy chapter 6, it says, fight the fight of faith. You know what the good fight of faith is? Trust in God, not money. Go back and look at the context of that passage. That's what the fight of faith is to trust God, not money. That they do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute. Now, 1 Thessalonians 4:16-24 is an issue of debate and study throughout Christianity. The following is submitted for your consideration. Remember, you're the grand jury. 7 verses have been highlighted. In your review, consider the entire passage before making your own spirit-led conclusion. For this study, there is one lesson we will address. Will the just prosper up to the second advent of Christ? In other words, will we prosper until Christ returns? Or will we have really bad times before Christ returns? I'm going to let you make the decision. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 through the end, and then chapter 5 through 24. Now, in your notes, we've made in bold 7 verses. I'm going to read those 7 verses for you. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So will we ever be with the Lord. Now, for years they've said this is the rapture of the church. When will it occur? I happen to be progressive trib. I hope it's pre. If it's not pre, I'm mid. If it's not mid, I'm post. And if it's post, I'm pan trib. It's all going to pan out anyway. Now, so when is this going to happen? Verse 2 of chapter 5. For yourselves know perfectly that that day of the Lord cometh as a thief in the night. Now, this next verse is a key. When they shall say, not you, when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction. Cometh upon who? Them. Does it come upon the Christian? Doesn't say that, does it? As travail cometh upon a woman with child, and who shall not escape? They shall not escape. Did Paul get the words right? I'm going to leave that up to you to decide. Verse 4. But you, brothers and sisters, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief in the night. Okay? Now, is God trying to tell us something? He's trying to tell us to get ready for something that's going to take place before the second advent of Christ? I think he is, but you've got to decide. Verse 9, for God hath not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain what? When? There or here? Or both places? See, I think it's both places. Now, verse 23, and the very God of peace sanctify you wholly, and I pray God your whole spirit, soul, and body be preserved blameless until when? So what's it saying? You guys decide. See, I happen to believe that there's going to be an end-time transfer of wealth before the second advent of Christ. And I think at that time, God's going to give the rich, unrighteous, an opportunity to repent when they lose their riches. Now, is that a reality? You decide that. Now, I want you on your own to go through, and I want you to look at some words, like verse 18, wherefore comfort one another with these words. How are you going to comfort one another with wrath if you're facing wrath? What are you going to comfort one another with? But of the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write to you. You already know about it. In other words, you just go through this and you look at the number of times comfort is mentioned. Verse 11 of chapter 5. Wherefore, comfort yourselves together. Verse 14. In the middle of the verse, comfort the feeble-minded. See, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that 7 times in that passage, God says to comfort yourselves with what? Wrath, or that you're going to escape it? With the end-time transfer of wealth, or trouble? Which is it? You decide. I've already made a decision. I hope I'm right. And I hope God will lead you in making the right decision.